Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I never thought I would find myself in this position, sitting across from my husband's boss, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The words he had just spoken lingered in the air between us, thick and heavy, changing everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my husband, and the life we had built together over the past 35 years. But let me back up a little. My name is Diane. I'm 59 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been happily married to Richard, a man I once believed was my perfect match. We met in college, married young, and built a life together, raising 2 children and weathering the storms that inevitably come with a long-term relationship. Richard had always been a hard worker, devoted to providing for our family, and while our marriage wasn't perfect, I had never once doubted his loyalty or the foundation we had built. That all changed the night of the company gala. It was one of those extravagant corporate events that Richard's company hosted once a year. Lavish dinners, flowing champagne, and speeches that went on far too long. I had attended dozens of these over the years, always playing the supportive wife, smiling politely at people I barely knew while Richard shook hands and talked business. But this year was different. There was a shift in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Maybe it was the way people looked at me, pitying, curious, almost hesitant. Or maybe it was the way Richard himself seemed, distant. He had always been charismatic at these events, but that night he seemed preoccupied, distracted, his smile forced. I had planned to ignore it, to push aside the gnawing unease in my gut, until Richard's boss, Alan Whitmore, pulled me aside. Alan was in his early 60s, a well-respected man with salt and pepper hair and an air of quiet authority. We had always been cordial, exchanging pleasantries at these events, but we had never had a conversation beyond the usual small talk. That night, however, he looked at me with something different in his eyes, something almost like regret. "Diane," he said, his voice low, "would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment? There's something I need to talk to you about." I hesitated, glancing around the room. Richard was deep in conversation with a group of executives, laughing at some joke I hadn't heard. For a brief second, I wondered if he had noticed that his boss was pulling me away, but he never even looked in my direction. I followed Alan out onto the balcony, where the cool night air wrapped around us, a stark contrast to the warmth of the ballroom. The city stretched out before us, lights twinkling against the dark sky, but I could hardly appreciate the view. My nerves were on edge. "What is this about, Alain?" I asked, my voice steady despite the unease creeping into my chest. He exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck as if searching for the right words. "Diane, I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't think you had a right to know. And I need you to understand that I'm not trying to interfere in your marriage. But I can't keep quiet about this anymore." My stomach clenched. Keep quiet about what? Alan hesitated, then met my gaze with a solemn expression. "Richard has been keeping something from you. Something big." The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath me. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white. "Alan, if you have something to say, just say it." He sighed, then spoke the words that would unravel everything. "I know about her." For a moment, I couldn't process what he meant. The words felt foreign, disjointed, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. But then, as the silence stretched between us, realization dawned. "No," I said automatically, shaking my head. "You're mistaken." Alan looked at me with something like sympathy. "I wish I were." I felt the ground slip away beneath me. My breath hitched, and for a second I thought I might collapse. Who? The question barely escaped my lips. He hesitated, then said her name. A name I recognized. A name that shattered the illusion I had held onto for decades. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of Alan. I simply turned and walked away, my mind spinning, my heart hammering. By the time I found Richard inside the ballroom, he was still laughing with his colleagues, a glass of whiskey in his hand, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath my feet. And in that moment, standing there in my elegant evening gown, surrounded by laughter and music, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know the man I had married, and I wasn't sure if I ever had. I don't remember how I made it through the rest of the gala. Everything felt like a blur. The clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversation, the occasional bursts of laughter that felt so distant, so disconnected from the chaos raging inside me. I kept my face composed, my expression neutral, but beneath the surface I was unraveling. Richard was completely oblivious. He smiled, he networked, he made his rounds like the perfect executive, while I stood there, drowning in the knowledge Alan had just given me. There was another woman. I kept stealing glances at Richard, searching for something, guilt, hesitation, a flicker of recognition that he knew what I now knew. But there was nothing. He was as smooth as ever, and that realization unsettled me even more. If he had been hiding this, how long had he been doing it? And how could I have been so blind? The drive home was painfully silent. Richard, slightly buzzed from the whiskey, was in high spirits, drumming his fingers against the steering wheel as if he didn't have a care in the world. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the dark road, my mind spinning with 1,000 questions. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I spoke with Alan tonight," I said, my voice carefully controlled. Richard chuckled. "Yeah, he's a good guy. Can be a little intense, but he means well." I turned to look at him, searching for any sign of unease. He told me something interesting. That was the moment his fingers stilled on the wheel. It was brief, just a half-second pause, but I caught it. "What's that?" he asked, his tone casual. Too casual. I swallowed hard. He said he knows about her. For the first time that night, I saw it, the crack in his perfect facade. It was subtle, just a small shift in his expression, but it was there. His jaw tensed, his grip on the wheel tightened, and for a fleeting moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. He exhaled sharply through his nose, then let out a forced chuckle. Alan's always been a bit of a gossip. You know how these office rumors get. "Don't do that, Richard." My voice was steadier than I expected. "Don't brush this off. I need to know the truth." He sighed, rubbing his temple as if this conversation was an inconvenience. "Diane, come on. We've been married for 35 years. Do you really think I would do something like that?" That was the moment something inside me snapped. "Would you?" My voice was sharper now, laced with something I hadn't felt in a long time, anger. "Because right now, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to believe. But I do know that Alan wouldn't have pulled me aside unless he had a damn good reason." Richard's lips pressed into a thin line. His silence spoke louder than words. The rest of the drive home was suffocating. When we pulled into the driveway, I got out of the car before he even turned off the engine. I walked straight into the house, my heels clicking against the tile floor as I made my way to the kitchen. I needed something to hold on to, something solid, something real. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hands were shaking too much to take a sip. A moment later, Richard stepped into the kitchen, his face drawn, his eyes darker than before. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "You really want to do this now?" he asked. I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Richard, I'd rather wait until our 40th anniversary dinner to discuss your affair." He flinched, just slightly, but I caught it. "Who is she?" My voice was quiet, but firm. He looked away, staring at the marble countertop as if the answer were carved into the stone. "Diane," he sighed, "it's not what you think." I slammed my glass down. "Then tell me what it is, because right now it looks an awful lot like my husband has been lying to me." The silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he spoke. "It's complicated." I let out a hollow laugh. "Oh, I bet it is." He ran a hand through his hair, looking more exhausted than I had ever seen him. "She's someone I work with. It's not an affair, not in the way you're thinking." "Not in the way I'm thinking," I repeated, my voice shaking. "Then tell me, Richard, how should I be thinking about it?" He hesitated, and that hesitation cut deeper than anything else. "I never meant for it to happen," he finally said. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." There it was. The confirmation. A cold, sharp pain settled in my chest, one that I knew would take a long time to fade. "How long?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Richard inhaled deeply, then exhaled. "About a year?" "A year." An entire year of deception. An entire year of him coming home to me, sitting across from me at the dinner table, kissing me good night, all while another woman existed in the spaces between. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Who is she?" I asked again. Richard's shoulders sagged. "Her name is Julia." Julia. The name echoed in my mind, foreign yet familiar. I knew that name. She had been at the gala tonight. I had seen her. A younger woman, mid-40s, attractive in a polished, professional way. I had even complimented her dress. And all the while, she had been sleeping with my husband. I took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Do you love her?" Richard's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "Diane, come on. I love you. I've always loved you." "But you wanted her." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was already there, hanging in the space between us, impossible to ignore. I turned away, feeling something inside me shift, something irreversible. I had spent 35 years building a life with this man, believing in the foundation we had created. And now, in the span of one night, that foundation had cracked beneath my feet. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know if it could be repaired. The silence between us felt heavier than words could ever be. The weight of his confession pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I had spent 35 years loving this man, trusting him, believing that what we had was solid, unshakable. And yet, here we were. Richard shifted his weight, exhaling through his nose as if bracing himself for another round of questions. But I had none left. At least, not in that moment. I turned away from him, my hands gripping the cool marble of the kitchen counter. I could hear his breathing behind me, unsteady, unsure. It struck me how unfamiliar that was. Richard was always so sure of himself, always so in control. "Diane, please." He started, his voice softer now. I closed my eyes. "I need some air." Without waiting for his response, I grabbed my coat and walked out the back door. The night was cold, but I welcomed it. The sharp chill against my skin grounded me, kept me from dissolving into the storm of emotions raging inside. I stepped onto the patio, staring out at the garden Richard and I had tended together for years. The hydrangeas had long since lost their bloom, their dried petals rustling in the wind. A single porch light cast a golden glow across the yard, illuminating the familiar yet suddenly foreign space. How many nights had I stood here, completely unaware of the other life he was leading? Footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. "I never wanted to hurt you," Richard said quietly. I let out a bitter laugh. "You always were good with words." A pause. "It wasn't about replacing you, Diane." I turned then, my arms crossed against the cold. "Then what was it about, Richard? Tell me, because I'm dying to understand." He hesitated, rubbing a hand over his face. He looked older than he had just hours ago. "I don't know," he admitted. "I wish I had a better answer, but I don't. It just happened." I shook my head. "No, Richard, it didn't just happen. You made a choice. You made hundreds of choices over the past year. Every text, every lie, every moment you spent with her, that was a choice." He flinched at my words, but didn't argue. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremble in my voice. "Did you ever think about me? About us?" His eyes darkened with regret. "Of course I did, every single day." "Then why wasn't that enough?" Richard swallowed hard. "I don't know." The wind carried the silence between us, wrapping around me like an unwanted embrace. I turned my gaze back to the yard. "Alan told me something else tonight." Richard stiffened. "What?" I hesitated. If I said it out loud, it would make it real. But then again, it was already real. He said she's pregnant. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet as I spoke the words. Richard's face went completely still. The color drained from his skin. And that was all the confirmation I needed. A sharp breath escaped my lips, and I covered my mouth with my hand, as if that could somehow hold back the tidal wave of pain that crashed over me. "Oh my God," I whispered. "It's true." Richard's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Diane, No." My voice was raw, broken. "Don't say anything. Not right now." I took a step back, putting space between us, because I needed it. Because if I let him come any closer, I wasn't sure what I would do. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, to plead, to reach for me, but he didn't. Maybe he knew this was the moment where words wouldn't fix anything. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I need to be alone," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't stop me as I turned and walked inside. I didn't stop walking until I reached our bedroom, the room we had shared for over 3 decades, the room that suddenly felt like a stranger's. I shut the door behind me, pressing my back against it as the reality of everything settled in. My husband had betrayed me, and now another woman was carrying his child. And I had no idea what to do next. I don't know how long I stood there, my back pressed against the door, my breath coming in slow, measured gasps. My mind was a blur, my emotions tangled in knots too tight to untie. For 35 years, Richard had been my husband, my constant, my safe place. And in one night, that foundation had cracked, revealing the fragile ground beneath. But what shook me the most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the undeniable truth that my life was about to change forever. I finally moved, stepping toward the bed we had shared for decades. The sheets were still pulled back from the night before, the impression of his body faint but visible. I ran my fingers along the fabric, feeling its softness, its warmth. It had always been my sanctuary, but now it felt foreign. A quiet knock at the door. I didn't answer. A few seconds passed, and then Richard's voice came through, hesitant and thick with emotion. "Diane, can we talk?" I took a steadying breath. I wasn't ready, but I also knew I couldn't hide forever. Slowly, I crossed the room and opened the door. Richard stood there, his face weary, his shoulders heavy with guilt. In his hands was a small old photo, one of us on our wedding day. "I never stopped loving you," he said softly. I looked at the picture, the frozen image of two people so full of hope, of love, of promise. I almost didn't recognize them anymore. I exhaled, shaking my head. "If you loved me, why wasn't it enough?" He swallowed. "I wish I had an answer that would make this hurt less. But I don't." A lump formed in my throat. "She's pregnant, Richard. That's not something we can just move past." He nodded, his eyes filled with something that almost looked like fear. "I know." Silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Finally, I spoke the words that had been sitting on my tongue since I heard the truth. "What do you want to do?" His expression shifted. Uncertainty, regret, maybe even grief. "I don't know," he admitted. I let out a bitter laugh. "Well, I do." Richard stiffened. "Diane." "No," I interrupted. "I deserve better than this. I deserve better than a husband who doesn't know if he wants me or the woman carrying his child." Pain flashed across his face, but I didn't let it soften me. "For 35 years, I've stood by you. I've loved you. I've sacrificed for you. And this is what I get in return." My voice broke, but I didn't stop. "I won't beg you to love me, Richard. I won't fight for someone who didn't fight for me." His lips parted as if he wanted to argue, but I saw it in his eyes. He knew I was right. I squared my shoulders, standing taller than I had in hours. "I need space, and I need time. But most of all, I need respect, and I won't stay where I'm not valued." Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded. "I understand." I stepped back, gripping the edge of the door. "Then I think you should leave tonight." His face twisted with emotion, but he didn't fight me. He just gave a small nod, then turned and walked away. As I closed the door behind him, a strange thing happened. For the first time that night, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I could finally breathe. Months passed. Richard moved into a small apartment across town. The divorce papers were filed, and though it hurt, God, it hurt, I knew it was the right decision. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, whispering doubts into my ear. But those nights grew fewer, and the mornings became brighter. I rebuilt myself, piece by piece. I started taking long walks, reading books I had once set aside, reconnecting with friends I had neglected in the haze of marriage. And slowly, I found something I hadn't realized I had lost. Myself. Because at the end of it all, I wasn't just Richard's wife. I was Diane. And that was enough.